purpose of this is to help us remember that so much of what it means for us to imagine being a follower of Jesus begins with that. It begins with imagination. When St. Paul writes in Colossians chapter 3, "For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God." That's such a beautiful passage. And yet, at some level, I have no idea what he's talking about. I have no idea how to somehow make that make sense to me in an embodied way. If you were to say okay, Paul, so how do I actually what does that mean for me when I leave for the office? Is that just some cognitive thing I'm supposed to some reality, some theological precept I'm supposed to hold on to? How's that supposed to help me? And I want to suggest that in order for us to turn from shame, we need something to turn to, not just turn away from something, but we're turning towards something. And that's the purpose of this, is to give us at least one tool. There are many, one tool to which we can turn as a substitute for the message that our shame attendant is wanting to give us so often. So with this in mind, I just want to turn our attention to Luke 3:22. And it is the story of Jesus' baptism. And it's Luke's version, because in Luke's version of this story, his rendition gives us the voice of God the Father in the first person, that he's speaking to Jesus, not speaking to the crowd about Jesus in this particular gospel version of it. And in just a moment, I'm going to lead you through this guided meditation and want to invite you, if you want to, you can feel free to stop your video if you want, because I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. It's up to you, whatever it is that you want to do about this. And I want to start, though, with this notion that when we read the texts about Jesus' baptism, we read that God was pleased with him, which, of course, is where all this begins, that Jesus is so pleasing in all of his life. And so we read the text and understand that this is a text about Jesus, that Jesus was pleasing to his Father. But I want to invite us to consider something in addition. I want us to consider that God the Father is also the kind of God who is pleased. This is the kind of God he is. This doesn't tell us a story just about Jesus. This tells us a story about God the Father. And I want to suggest to us that God the Father has been no less pleased with any single one of us. One of the differences is that Jesus believed it and was paying attention. What would it be like for us if we were to walk out of our front door every day with the voice of our Father reminding us of how utterly pleased he is that we are on the earth? And how does that then become something to which we turn, and turning away from our shame and our shame attendant's voice and turning to this voice that is telling us what is important for us to pay attention to? But it's not enough for us to just have that as some kind of abstract idea. Hence, we're going to enter into a guided visual imagery exercise. And with that in mind, I'm going to invite you all just to, wherever you happen to be, to find a comfortable position, comfortable posture, preferably with both feet on the ground, your back straight up, and allow yourself to allow your eyes to close. And I want you to take 2 deep breaths, 2 cleansing breaths. Take your time doing that. And now I want to invite you to, with your eyes closed, fully just imagine and sense and feel the space where you find yourself. Just be aware of the room where you are. Be aware of your body posture and what you feel in your body. Notice your feet planted on the ground. Notice the contact that your legs and your back have with where you're seated. And now I want to invite you to allow your attention to shift to a different space, a space of your own choosing, a space of beauty and strength. And that space can be anywhere you would like it to be. It could be inside, it could be outside. It could be a place of beauty that you've been before, or a place that you've never been. It could be near a mountain, in a meadow, near a body of water, a river, or the ocean. It could be in the woods. It could be in the desert. That space could be in the comfort of your favorite chair in your favorite room in your home. But a space of beauty and strength. And now I want to invite you, once you have found that space, and for some of us, it may take just a little while for us to get there and to arrive there. But once you have arrived there in your mind, I want you to take your time and look around in that space. Notice what you see. Notice what you hear. Notice the ambient air temperature. Notice any aromas that come to you. Notice whether in this space you are seated or standing. Take a look around. Take in its beauty. Take in its durability and its strength. Feel your feet firmly on the space where you are planted. And now, as you have looked around and noticed where you are, I invite you to allow for the presence of God to join you. And God will come as He will. He may come from one side or the other. He may come from behind you. He may come before you. But come He will on His terms and at His pace. And I invite you to notice His form and particularly His gaze. As His gaze meets and finds yours, notice His delight in coming upon you. Notice His kindness. Notice His intent. And now, hear your God say these words to you. You are my son, whom I love. And for those women who perhaps have joined us, you are my daughter, whom I love. You are my son. I am amazed and joyful that I get to be your father. I see you, my daughter, and I am filled with pride and joy. You are my son, and no one comes between us. I could not be more pleased to be your father and to be your God. You are my son. Those places that you fear and of which you are ashamed, I see, and all I see is your beauty. My son, I see you, and I want you to see me looking at you fearlessly. You are one of whom I want to experience nothing but comfort and confidence in my presence, because you are mine. You are who I love. It's you in whom I am so very well pleased. You are my son, and this is a time, these are moments that I want you to remember, for you belong to me, and I want you never to forget it. You are my son. You are my daughter. And you are the one in whom I am so pleased. And now I want to invite you to take in and remember your meeting with your God. And now notice that God is going to move, but never leave you alone. And as you notice his movement, out of your sight line, once again, take some time and look around at the environment where you find yourself, this place of beauty and strength. This place where you have encountered your God and your God has encountered you. Take in once again what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you feel. Take it in as the space to which you can return at any time in order for God to meet you here and remind you that you are his delight. And it is his intention to bring you to glory. And as you are looking around in this space of strength and beauty, notice what you're feeling in your body. Not just what you're thinking, but from your feet to your legs, to your pelvis, to your torso, to your arms, to your neck, to your head and face, to your chest and the way you're breathing, to your abdomen. Take note of what you sense and feel. And now I want to invite you to begin the process of returning from this space of beauty and strength to the space that you were previously occupying for our gathering. And as you do, simply allow your attention to shift so that you may find yourself again seated where you are, an attendee in our meeting, having been with your God in a space of beauty and strength to which you can return at any time. And now, when you are ready, but not before, I invite you to allow your eyes to open, returning to our meeting space, awake, alert, and attuned, and open to the Spirit who takes great delight in you and is bringing you to glory. When you are ready, and not before. Jay, usually at this time, what I do when I'm in an audience and we're doing this, and maybe we can use the chat function to do this. But in order for others to have opportunity to express what this experience was like, but also in order for others to hear what it was like for other people, I usually ask people to just offer one word that describes what that experience was like for them. And so maybe they could begin to put that one word in the chat. And we really try to limit it to one word. And at the same time, I also want to acknowledge that for some people, this exercise is, for not all people find this exercise to be comforting. There are some people that can find this exercise, in fact, to be somewhat difficult, maybe even disruptive, for a number of reasons, sometimes because of their own history of trauma, whether it's even the very closing of their eyes or the notion of intimacy with a God or father figure. It can feel distressing. And I want to acknowledge that, and acknowledge that for many people, to have an encounter with someone in that kind of intimate way is something that we have to work up to because of the nature of our stories. So I want to honor that and acknowledge that if your experience was not one of confidence and comfort, that's really quite okay. And that may be true for a number of people, maybe a lot of people here. But with that in mind, perhaps if people have been able to register in the chat one word, perhaps, Jay, you could share those words if they're there.
Yes.
If they've done that.
Yes.
Just run off that list in order for us to get a sense of what it's been like for other people.
Okay. So here are the list of words that I see. Victory, a lot of peace, peaceful, peace, approval, acceptance, remember, connection, cerebral. That's what I have so far.
I've seen security. I've seen confidence. came across my
Okay,
screen.
good.
Strength, weightless, connection. So I want to highlight that we like to say in our work that every baby, in this case, every boy or girl, comes into the world looking for someone looking for them. That's what we do. We come into the world looking for someone looking for us. And that's the beginning of what we would describe as being secure attachment. That secure attachment is made then available to us by what my friend and colleague Dan Siegel likes to talk about in terms of the 4 S's. And the 4 S's stands for 4 words, each to begin with the letter S. The first word is that we long to be seen. Every baby comes into the world looking for someone looking for them. We first long to be seen. And we long to be seen because we typically don't come into the world casually. We don't come into the world calmly. Babies typically come screaming into the world. Babies typically come in upset in the world. They were in a fine place to live, thank you very much. And now I've been squeezed through this tunnel. Like, yes, labor is difficult for mothers. Of course it is. But we haven't really gotten a good interview yet out of a newborn that tell us what was the trip like. You can imagine this wasn't necessarily something they were looking forward. They didn't even know it was coming. And so I want to be seen. I also want to be soothed. We are seen, we are soothed. And with being seen and being soothed, we eventually develop a sense of safety. I'm safe, I'm protected. No system, beginning with a cell, a human cell, no system can function if it's first not safe, if it first doesn't have integrity. The integrity of a cell wall enables the internal organelles of the cell to function. In order for me to function, I have to have a sense of confidence, a sense of safety in whatever the system is that I live in, that I occupy. But I can't be safe if first I'm not seen and then soothed. And with safety, then we move to what it means for me to be secure. And to be secure stretches my first 3 S's out into new boundary areas. For instance, to be secure means I am then commissioned to take the risk to launch out into the deep, to take risks. I might even make mistakes. I might even do hard things because I know that if I make mistakes, I can come back to where I am seen, soothed, and safe. And this is what creates an ever expanding sense of comfort and confidence in the world. This is what Jesus would have necessarily seen as he grew in wisdom and stature before God and man, as at his baptism he heard God's voice saying, "You are my son, whom I love, and in whom I'm well pleased." This is a man who has been seen, who has been soothed, who is safe, and is now ready to launch in a secure fashion to do the risky business of redemption. Shame wants to shear all that off. Shame does not want us to be seen. It wants us to feel as if we're invisible. Shame does not want us to be soothed. It wants us to be traumatized, as was happening to the woman in the garden in this conversation with the snake. Shame does not want us to be safe. Shame wants us to believe that we live in a world of danger, that we do not live in a world of abundance. We live in a world of scarcity, and the only way I can protect myself is through violence because I'm not safe. And certainly, security, that's not something I can trust because I don't have any sense in the first place that I'm even seen, let alone soothed, let alone safe. But in this exercise, we practice those 4 S's. Moreover, I want to invite us to consider that this is an exercise that you can return to over and over and over again, and neuroplastically, create space in which, as you meet God, you create a regenerated mind that you imagine and that becomes part of your habituated reality when you leave the house every morning. That when you leave the house, you're leaving, seeing your God seeing you and telling you how pleased he is that the people who are going to see you today are going to get the chance to see someone so illuminating. That, my friends, is what we practice paying attention to, such that when shame comes calling, we have something to which to turn our attention. I'm going to pause with that. And Jay, you can direct me and direct us as you will.
Okay. I'm not going to do anything right at this moment, but maybe I'll do one thing and then we're going to go on to your final talk, which I believe is From Banishment to Beauty.
Right.
Jesus and the Renewal of All Things. Everything we are doing today is meant to be, for those of you who are in recovery, is supplemental. In football terms, you have blocking and tackling, you have the basics, and our basics are our recovery meetings. Our ministry in Living Without Lust, we talk about the 4 pillars of recovery. We recommend that you maybe go off to a short-term workshop where you can begin to have a concentrated session with other people who are struggling and begin to break the kind of the spell of the addiction. We recommend when you come back, you get a therapist who understands sexual addiction from a Christian perspective. We can help you do that. Thirdly, we recommend you get into 12-step groups, and 12-step groups is where we tell our stories, where you become known. I always thought that there was a guy in recovery, he said, "I'm just another bozo on the bus," by which he meant, I'm just an ordinary sex addict. I'm just like everybody else. So one thing I didn't want to be, but I discovered it was what I was when I got into the rooms of recovery. That's where we tell our stories. We hear others and we nod our heads and we say, yes, I'm just like you and you're just like me. And then finally, we need a Christian mentor, somebody to walk alongside us, who'll take us to coffee and say, particularly if we're in a traumatic situation of a marital separation or divorce or a job firing or even jail, that you're going to come through this and I'm going to walk through it with you. If we can do those 4 things, if we can build those 4 things into our lives, we can begin to find a new life. And so next year, we hope that we'll have a COVID-free somewhat world, maybe not absolutely. And we'll return to our men's conference. We always try to host it the week after the Super Bowl because football is over and it's a major loss. And we'll do that next year, God willing, and also have our leaders dinner. We invite therapists and Christian leaders of all kinds to come and join us because we want to help you as Christian leaders. And some of you are here today. We want you to be able to speak sexual wholeness and integrity into your environments in which you are there. And we're here to help you to do that. And we have all kinds of resources to help you do it. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Curt for our final talk. We'll have a couple of minutes of final notes at the end, and then we'll be finished somewhere near the top of the hour. So Curt, back to you.
Again, I just want to say, Jay, I'm just so grateful to have been invited. It's been humbling to be part of this group of men who are working hard to follow Jesus and working hard toward what the Bible would call sanctification and what we call recovery, and all those steps that you just named that are so crucially important. I would suggest not just for people who are in recovery from addiction, but for every single human on the planet. And so it's a beautiful outline. It's a beautiful model. And so thank you for inviting me to be part of this. Our last time, this last talk is titled From Banishment to Beauty, Jesus and the Renewal of All Things. I want us, one of the things in our practice, I'm a psychiatrist, and, coming up through medical school and residency, one of the things that was interesting was this notion that, we didn't have a single lecture, let alone course, on what mental health is. We have all kinds of courses on emotional pathology. I can tell you when there's a problem. I can tell you when something's wrong, but I don't have a single course on what health actually is. In fact, in Western medicine, we pay a lot of attention to pathology. In medical school, we have an entire 2 years of pathology that we study. And of course, there's reason for that because there's so much of it around. There are a gazillion ways in which the world is in trouble, in which we are problems to be solved, in which we are diagnoses to make so that we can be treated. This is not an unhelpful way. In fact, it's a necessary way for us to be able to live in the world, be able to diagnose my problem. If I can't, then I can't fix my toilet. I can't change the tire in my car. We can't, fix the computer. We need to be able to diagnose problems and see them for what they are. However, I want to invite us to consider that we are so wrapped with that way of seeing the world that we forget that that's not the primary lens through which God sees the world. God does not see the world. God does not see you. God does not see me primarily as a problem that needs to be fixed. He does not see you as a psychiatric diagnosis that needs to be made and treated. He sees you as a father sees a son, and what he envisions is beauty in the making. And so you've heard me say already that there is this way of seeing the world in which we can only see it as a problem or a pathology. And I want to invite us to consider that our lives, our recovery work is not just an effort to try to fix a broken thing. It is we are getting into the business of creating beauty and goodness in the world. And this is what we are doing. The recovery is not primarily about a problem-solving venture. It is about the creation of new creation. And with that in mind, I want to turn now to our last time together. And what does it mean? From banishment, this sense of we see the world as pathology, it's been banished. And we know that shame, that's what shame does. It isolates us. It banishes parts of me from me. It banishes me from you and you from me. It banishes one community from another community. And we are here to acknowledge that Jesus has no intention of leaving the world or leaving any part of us in that state of banishment, but is bringing us all to glory. And to do that, I want us to focus on the 12th chapter of Hebrews, the first 2 verses. We're going to walk through this, and I want to talk about it as a model and as an application template for some things that we can do practically to address shame and to begin to practice seeing the world in terms of the question, what is the next new artifact of beauty that you want to create today? As opposed to, what is the problem that I need to avoid? What is the new thing? What is the new thing that God wants to artistically help me be part of creating in the world today? Hebrews 12, verses 1 and 2, we read this. Therefore, since we have before us such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off the sin that so easily entangles or distracts us, running the race set before us with perseverance, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and now sits at the right hand of God. You can go back and read that in your scriptural texts when it's convenient. You may even be able, even now, to find it as you're looking on the internet. But I want to walk through this, and I want to invite us to, again, imagine. What does it mean for us to embody the things that we are going to reflect on in these 2 verses? So first of all, therefore, since you have before you such a great cloud of witnesses. Now, the writer is talking about the cloud of witnesses that he's just referred to in Hebrews chapter 11, this list of faithful people, some named, some not, some famous, some unknown. People who were faithful, this cloud of witnesses, this group of people who are bearing witness to other people's lives. The writer is recognizing that we live in a world in which our life longs to have someone bear witness to it. And I want to invite us to consider, who are the people who make up your cloud of witnesses? We all need one. It is to be assumed that in order for us to survive, let alone flourish, requires that we have a cloud of witnesses before us. And in this section of the scripture, he's referring to people, many of whom have died, but they don't have to be dead. They can be alive. Who are the people that are living right now who are bearing witness to your life? So we begin with this notion that to dismantle shame and to move into a posture of being curious about the next beautiful artifact we are going to create while we are becoming said beauty, we are doing so in the context of community. Community that asks us really important questions, community that comforts and empathizes with us, community that sometimes shepherds us, sometimes admonishes us, sometimes invites us to do things that we don't want to do, sometimes invites us to stop doing things that we don't want to stop doing. But it is a community nonetheless that we take up residence in order for us to recognize that for us to live fully, we are going to live fully in the context of community. Therefore, since we have this great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off the sin that so easily entangles. We said earlier that God's no, with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, God's no is as central and significant to his loving us as is his yes. What are the things that we need to throw off? What are the things from which we need to turn our attention in order to turn our attention to something else? The reality is that restraint, if we're going to flourish, if we're going to dismantle shame, if we are going to be able to imagine being with Jesus at the right hand of our Father, restraint will be crucial in that endeavor. One of the things that we're not always, that aware of is that at multiple times throughout the day, upwards to 80% of the activity of the brain is directed to the act of restraint. So much of the brain's activity is directed toward restraint. It's directed toward actually turning off other neurons that, if they were to be allowed to do whatever they wanted to do, we would be doing all kinds of things. Imagine this, even already today. Imagine the number of things that you have thought that you haven't said, that you have wondered that you haven't said aloud. Imagine just the wealth of things that we may have said or thought that we don't say, that if we had, what our life would be like. Imagine the feelings we have. Imagine the impulses we have. Imagine all the stuff that we could do, but for restraint. In order for us to flourish, we must first employ restraint in order for us to be able to join God's no about certain things. This is what professional athletes do all the time. This is what professional artists, what professional musicians are doing all the time. They are saying no to a lot of things. What would be in the list of no's that you would sense God is calling you to apply more restraint to? One activity that we invite people to do is to engage in making a list of restraint. What would be my restraint list? Where are the things that God is asking me to prune these things back in order for me to move forward with the other things that he wants to create with me? Now, this gets us to another part of neuroplasticity, and that is that when we restrain parts of the brain's activity, we actually then liberate other parts of the brain's activity to expand. When I show restraint, I got to be honest, like last night, my wife and I are having a conversation about upcoming plans for next week. And I have to tell you, like, restraint was not on my radar screen in the course of this conversation. We're talking and she says, well, I think that we're going to go to this place next week. And I said, I can't go there. I got too much to do. Just pretty much just like that. Like, I was anxious. I was worried about this stuff I got to get done between now and next Friday. And without saying, gosh, I think I'm feeling a little anxious about that. No, I'm like, no, I can't go. I can't go there. And, you see the look on her face, right? And like, y'all know the look, right? And it's not a look you want to see. And that lack of restraint really, in many respects, isn't just something that comes across in the tone of my voice, which it does. It also speaks into her story. It speaks into her story saying, what you want, I'm now going to bulldoze. Now, this is not an event. I mean, we were able to recover and repair that rupture pretty readily. But that's just a minor version of things that happened to me like repeatedly. Because there are many moments where restraint is not something I'm paying attention to. One other thing I'll say about this verse is that in the Greek, this notion of sin that so easily entangles us, this word, this English word for entangle, the Greek word for that could easily be translated as the word distract. The sin that so easily distracts us. And I want to suggest this, that all sin begins with distraction. All sin begins with my attention being distracted from where I want it to be directed to where evil is trying to take it to be directed. I am tempted not just by a thing, I am tempted by my attention shifting to something. And so therein lies the other question. How well am I paying attention to what I'm paying attention to, such that I'm aware that when my attention is being shifted, being entangled in the things that lead me toward a space where restraint will be easy for me to throw off. Therefore, let us throw off the sin that so easily entangles us and run with perseverance the race set before us. A word about perseverance. This gets back to neuroplasticity and community. We've said that the things that we want to become really, really good at are things that we need to practice in small ways very, very frequently. And so that exercise that we were led through just a moment ago, that guided visual imagery exercise, that took about 15 minutes. You could take 15 minutes every day, but you could also take 5 minutes of that 15 minutes and drop into that imagined space, spend 5 minutes there, and remind your soul and yourself what it means, not just cognitively, but what viscerally you feel in your chest to be seen by the God who sees you. That kind of practice is what perseverance is about. My willingness to endure, my willingness to continue to do something over and over and over again. Like I said at the very beginning of our meeting, however, the brain is able to do a lot of really hard things for a long time, as long as it doesn't have to do it by itself. And to the degree that we are practicing restraint, practicing being in community, practicing perseverance in community, that community strengthens that very action of perseverance. It also recognizes that this life of recovery is a life that we will persevere in. It is not a life that we're going to reach some plateau. I'm not going to reach a benchmark by January 1st of next year, and then I'll be done with this process. This is a process that I will persevere in until I am dead, while continually growing in my sense and awareness of God's delight and joy in me, and growing in my awareness of the beauty that I see in the world and that God and I are partnering in creating. Let us run the race then with perseverance that is set before us, the race that is set before us, remembering that, I would just like to say, I would like to be in charge of my life. And I have to acknowledge that there are just a lot of places in my life that I'm not in charge. I wish that were different. But this race has been set by somebody else, the race set before me. And the one who has set that is a God who sees every step and is delighted in being present with us along the way. How do we run this race with perseverance, this race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. And this is where we come back to this notion of what does it mean for us to see Jesus seeing us? We don't just then see Jesus seeing me do things. I'm seeing Jesus at work himself. And so this is where practicing actually inserting ourselves in gospel stories can be helpful. So one exercise, one practical thing to do is imagine being yourself at the table where Matthew is collecting taxes when Jesus arrives and says to Matthew, I want you to be with me. And then he turns and looks at you and says, I want you too. Come be with me. You're the one standing at the base of the tree, up in the boughs of which sits this guy named Zacchaeus. And Jesus looks up and sees him and says, I'm going to your house today. And you there, Rick, I want you to come and be at the dinner too. What is it like for us to insert ourselves in these stories, to fix our eyes on what Jesus is doing, see who he is, watch what he does? But even more importantly, for us to see him seeing us. There's a famous painting that many of you are familiar with about Peter in the moments immediately following the cock crowing after his denial of Jesus the third time. And the painting shows Peter turned away from Jesus in shame and Jesus looking at him from the distance, looking, because in Luke's gospel, we read that as the cock crowed, Jesus looked at him straight in the eye. Now, what's interesting about this is that the painting itself shows Jesus looking with this look of somewhat sadness. Peter turned away in sorrow. But I wonder, is it possible that if we would have looked more carefully, the look we would have seen coming from Jesus would have been something akin to, Peter, I know what you've done. It doesn't surprise me. Don't worry. I'll see you in 3 days. Is it possible that in our gazing at Jesus, gazing at us, we will not turn away as Peter did in our shame, but we will see a man gazing at us with comfort and confidence? What does it mean for us to fix our eyes on Jesus in so many of these ways? The author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy set before him, this delight that we sense that he has in being with us. Who are the people that you know, if you were to walk in the room, they were to say, oh my gosh, you're here. We've been waiting for you all night. I would suggest that this is the posture of the Holy Trinity for us every morning when we wake up. I don't know if you saw them this morning. You woke up, you rolled out of bed, and there you were in your underwear. And the Holy Trinity is waiting for you. You're here. We've been waiting for you all, like, we're going to go to this conference. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be great. And like, we can't wait to go into the day with you. We don't have a lot of spaces where we get to experience and practice being received with joy, that the writer speaks of which here, that Jesus was foreseeing in his being with us. You are God's delight. The joy set before him, he endured the cross. It's important to know, if we're going to live this life with integrity, if you're going to create a world of beauty and goodness, we're going to suffer. And we're going to suffer not just because we're shedding all the scales of the behavior that we don't want to have because we're putting to death old things, but because in the very act of taking on beauty and goodness, evil is not going to go quietly into the night. It is important for us to know that our suffering is coming not just because of the consequences of our own behavior, but because moving toward reality will mean we are leaving behind those who think we're running away from it. And so this is significant for us to know that we will endure the cross. Jesus did not say, therefore, if anyone would follow me, let him come and pick up his Tesla and come after me. I wish that had been the case. But instead, we see that he endured the cross, scorning its shame. And here's where we're going to start to move toward our wrap-up time. One of the things that we do with our patients on a routine basis is we instruct them to develop what we call a shame inventory. Now, this sounds like a fun thing to do. We have them get 3x5 cards. And, if you remember, there was such a thing at one time, 3x5. I think they still make them. And because we want them to have something that's embodied, something that they can actually touch. And beginning in their day, anytime that they sense, image, feel, think, or have an action with their body that represents shame, I just want them to make a mark. And you just collect these marks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We instruct them, we don't want you, and all this is in the book. We don't want you to, we don't want you to understand, why did you do that? What's that all about? I just want you to make a mark. And the reason I want you to make a mark primarily and not have to figure it all out is because I simply want you to interrupt the neural network process that is currently engaged, that is sending you down the rabbit hole of shame. The very act of making a mark interrupts and gives you the opportunity to turn your attention to Luke 3:22. We pause and turn our attention elsewhere. All sin begins with distraction of the attention. Shame is what evil wants to use to straitjacket your imagination and take you down that rabbit hole. I had a guy once say to me, he said, look, Curt, by 10 o'clock that morning, I'd filled front and back of 2 3x5 cards. Look, I got a job I got to do. I have work that I actually have to do. I can't just do this inventory. But here's the thing. The point of it is to awaken our attention to where shame shows up, that we become much more astutely and acutely attuned to where it is. Its subtlety is part of how it does its damage to us, that it remains hidden. But to the degree that we go to look for it, evil will be found out. And when it is, we then occupy with Jesus the space at God's right hand. And Jesus continues to come to find us as he came to find Peter in John 21. Jesus asks him 3 times, do you love me? And we see that Peter, by the 3rd time, is grief-stricken. He is grieved that Jesus asks him yet a 3rd time. And yet I can't help but think that the reason Jesus is asking is because Jesus knows that Peter still harbors a certain shame within him for what had happened 6 weeks before. He's coming for this because Jesus has no intention of leaving any stone unturned where shame lives. He has no intention of leaving any of that space where we will then have to conform to it. We will have to contain it. We will have to burn energy there. Energy that is then not available for us to create goodness and beauty in the world. Energy that I'm going to cope with through my addiction. This is the work of God, that Jesus is bringing all things to beauty and goodness, such that we become embodied outposts of goodness and beauty in the world. I'm going to leave with this one last example. There's a Japanese art form that many of you may now be more familiar with. It's called Kinsugi. You can look it up. It's spelled Kintssugi. Kinsugi. I was introduced to this by my friend Maku Fujimura, who is a Japanese-American painter. Kinsugi is an art form in which shattered pieces of pottery came out of the ancient history of Japan, of a warlord's favorite tea bowl that was fractured, and they tried to repair it. And when it was brought to him, repaired in a poor way, the one who was responsible for it being fractured was worried for his life. And yet when a master craftsman saw this, he said, wait, give me a moment. And what the master craftsman did, he took these pieces of shards of bowl back and he glued them back together. And along the fracture lines, he painted them with gold. And when you look at these pieces online, you will see that these tea bowls are utterly spellbinding in their beauty. Not because of the perfection of their original craftsmanship, but because of their very fracture lines that they have. Because along those fracture lines, gold and silver and platinum is applied, and we see that our lives become kintsugi. It is in the very places where our shame has hidden, the very places where our brokenness has been laying, that Jesus comes, puts this back together, and says, this is the very space where beauty is going to emerge. I'm going to show the world, not just through your perfection, but through your brokenness. I'm going to show the world what beauty and redemption really looks like, because you are not a problem to be solved. You are not a diagnosis to be made and treated. You are beauty in the process of emerging and coming into the attention of the world, because this is what he's doing with the world as a whole. And so with that, I want to, again, just say how grateful I am, what a joy it's been to be with you all. And I'll leave it at that and say thanks to Jay for inviting me to be part of this, and hope that this has been helpful.
Yeah. Thank you, Curt. I'm just going to say three quick things, and maybe I'll ask you to close us with prayer. I think that would be a good ending. Before I ask you to do that, I will thank you. But let me just say three quick things. We at Living Without Lust rely on you to put us in touch with men who are struggling in this area with lust, with porn. It's a very big problem, and it is increasing dramatically, and the ages are getting younger and younger. You're the ones who are in touch with folks that need the help. We have, there are champions that we have that are on this call that are constantly referring people to us. We hope that many of you will become those champions. You can get in touch with me through the website, livingwithoutlust.com. My contact information is there. Many of you have my cell phone. Jay@livingwithoutlust is my email. Jay@livingwithoutlust.com, excuse me. The second thing is consider the Zoom series in the spring. That information will be on the internet. You'll have to sign up, and then we'll send you a link to those Friday noon Zoom calls, which will go for about 9 or 10 weeks, beginning in the middle of March. And then the last thing is, if something's come up for you today, something has stirred in you, you're wanting to make a new turn in your life and your recovery, share that with somebody close to you. You can share it with us if you like, but think about ways in which God has stirred up something in you that you may need to take action on. Because as we do that, and as we tell others what we're considering, what we're thinking, then we begin to become clear on the road ahead, and we journey forward together. So please consider doing that. And so, Curt, we want to thank you for giving us a very rich morning. You've given us a lot of food for the journey, and we're so grateful that you've taken this time to be with us. And I would now just ask you to close us with prayer, and after that, we will end the meeting.
Thanks, Jay. Let's pray together. Holy Trinity, God our Father, Jesus our brother, Spirit who empowers us, we give you all praise and thanksgiving for having made us. It is too much for us to come to terms with the notion that before we even existed, you knew us. We long to live into the sonship that you have prepared for us. And for those women, for the daughtership that you have prepared for us. We long to be, in our own minds, able to see our illumination. As Jesus, you said that we are the light of the world. We long for you to transform our hearts and our minds and change our brains. We long for you to use us to create beauty and goodness in the world. We long to be people of integrity, people of joy, people of goodness. And I ask that you would take all that has been good and right and beautiful about our time today and seal it within us. Plant it, may it germinate, may it grow, may it flourish, and may it bear fruit. and take all else that is unnecessary and enable us to leave it behind. That we may go into this day, into this weekend, and into our coming days as sons and daughters of God, as brothers and sisters of the King, who is now and reigns forever and is surely coming, and in whose name we pray. Amen.